For more than 2 years, federal agents had hunted a man they could not see, could not identify, and could not find. Then, on October 1st, 2013, they found him sitting alone inside a public library in San Francisco. His laptop was open, his hands were on the keyboard, and on the screen was the secret control panel of the largest illegal marketplace on the internet. The agents were only meters away, but there was a problem. They could not let him close the laptop. One movement of his hand could lock away the digital evidence they had spent years chasing. So instead of rushing him, federal agents hid between the bookshelves and waited. They needed to make one of the most hunted men on the internet look away from his computer for just a few seconds. And the way they planned to do it was almost absurdly simple. How had investigators gone from chasing an anonymous name buried inside the dark web to standing close enough to reach out and take his laptop? To understand how the net finally closed around the creator of the Silk Road, you have to understand how he built his fortress in the first place. Years earlier, Ross Ulbricht had a radical idea. He wanted to create a truly free market, an economic experiment completely outside the reach of government regulation. He envisioned a space where any two people could trade anything they wanted, without surveillance, interference, or law enforcement. To turn that philosophy into a reality, he combined two specific technologies. He utilized the Tor network to hide a user's physical location, and he used Bitcoin, a decentralized digital currency that allowed people to send money without a bank or central authority tracking the transaction. When combined, these two tools created a powerful shield. In early 2011, he launched a hidden website called Silk Road. But a hidden marketplace is entirely useless if nobody knows how to find it. Ulbricht needed customers. In the very early days, before the site was famous, there were no vendors, there were no buyers. He even grew his own magic mushrooms in a secluded cabin just to have a first product to list on the platform. To get the experiment off the ground, he had to go out onto the regular, open internet to spread the word. On a forum dedicated to growing magic mushrooms, a user registered the name Altoid. The user posted a link asking if anyone had seen a new anonymous marketplace called Silk Road. It seemed like an insignificant piece of digital spam. Nobody knew it yet, but that single promotional post would eventually become the thread that unraveled the entire mystery. Silk Road did not stay small for long. Word spread. It exploded into the Amazon of the dark web. Vendors set up digital storefronts, offering everything from counterfeit documents to massive quantities of narcotics. Buyers left detailed reviews rating the quality of the products and the speed of the shipping. The marketplace handled millions of dollars in transactions, taking a small, automated commission on every single sale. And behind it all was a mysterious administrator who had adopted the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. He was a digital kingpin, running a highly organized operation from behind a screen, publishing philosophical essays on the site's forums, and commanding a fierce loyalty from his users. As the marketplace grew, it triggered a logistical nightmare for law enforcement in the physical world. Thousands of packages of contraband began flooding the United States Postal Service. Customs agents were suddenly finding ecstasy pills hidden inside hollowed-out books and vacuum-sealed bags of narcotics tucked inside DVD cases. Law enforcement agencies realized they were facing a completely new kind of criminal enterprise. This was not street-level dealing. This was global e-commerce. The FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security Investigations, and the IRS all launched operations. But investigators immediately faced a massive structural problem. They were completely blind. They could intercept the packages in the mail, they could arrest individual buyers, they could run sophisticated undercover operations to catch specific vendors. But arresting a vendor was like cutting off the head of a hydra. 2 more would instantly replace them. Finding the person actually controlling the marketplace was a fundamentally different problem. The servers were hidden behind Tor. Payments moved through Bitcoin addresses rather than traditional bank accounts. Dread Pirate Roberts was a phantom, existing only as text on a screen. To catch him, the investigations had to converge from multiple directions at once. The first major break came not from identifying the man, but from locating the machine. FBI cyber investigators meticulously probed the Silk Road website, looking for any technical flaw in the armor. A hidden service on Tor is designed to conceal its true IP address. But investigators analyzed how the site processed data, looking for leaks. According to the FBI, they eventually found a misconfiguration in the site's login interface. When interacting with a specific piece of code, the system quietly leaked its true IP address, bypassing the Tor network's protective routing. While the exact technical details of this discovery would later become a subject of intense debate and controversy in cybersecurity circles, with some questioning exactly how the FBI obtained the address, the result was undeniable. The leak led federal agents to a physical server sitting in a data center in Reykjavik, Iceland. Authorities quietly obtained a copy of the server's data. For the first time, investigators had direct access to a vast collection of information from inside the Silk Road infrastructure. They could see the code, they could see the database structures, they could see how the financial ledgers operated. They had penetrated the walls of the digital fortress. But they still did not have the one thing they needed most: a name. The server logs revealed that the administrator was logging into the system through a virtual private network. Dread Pirate Roberts was bouncing his connection through a VPN, masking his real physical location from his own server. The infrastructure had been breached, but the kingpin was still faceless. The breakthrough that ultimately doomed the empire did not come from a brilliant decryption algorithm, a massive cyber attack, or the data pulled from the Iceland server. It came from an IRS criminal investigator named Gary Alford. Alford was not a cybersecurity specialist analyzing network traffic. He was a traditional financial investigator. And while other agencies were looking deep inside the dark web, Alford was searching the regular open internet. He operated on a simple theory. Whoever created Silk Road had to have advertised it before it was famous. He wanted to find the absolute earliest mentions of the site, hoping the creator had made a mistake before he fully understood what he was building. Alford searched backward. He restricted his Google search dates to the very narrow window of time in early 2011, right when the site launched, long before a famous media article sent millions of users to the platform. He combed through years of archived forum posts, looking for a digital needle. Eventually, he found the old post on the mushroom-growing website. He saw the user Altoid enthusiastically posting a link to the brand-new anonymous marketplace. Alford focused his search entirely on that username, tracking it across different internet forums. Months after the initial promotion, the same user, Altoid, appeared on a completely different website, a forum for computer programmers. The user was asking a highly specific technical question about PHP code. But at the end of the post, the user made a fatal mistake. Hoping for a quick answer, Altoid asked other coders to send their solutions directly to his personal email address. The address was Ross Ulbricht Eggmail Hambi. If you were hunting a digital ghost, would you expect the fatal flaw to be a multi-million-dollar cryptographic failure, or a single forum post made years before the empire even mattered? For years, Dread Pirate Roberts had been protected by powerful anonymity tools. He had operated with extreme caution, yet one of the strongest clues pointing toward his true identity was sitting on the open web, left behind before he had learned to be careful. Investigators finally had a name. They pulled the records for Ross Ulbricht. They discovered he was a young, highly educated man living in San Francisco. But a name was not enough. The task forces began to tighten the net, layering their evidence. Finding an email address in an old forum post was a massive clue, but it did not definitively prove that Ross Ulbricht was currently operating as Dread Pirate Roberts. Then, an entirely different investigative thread collided with the cyber hunt. And this time, the clue was not hidden on a server in Iceland. It was traveling through the mail. In the summer of 2013, Customs and Border Protection intercepted a package crossing the border from Canada into the United States. Inside, they found 9 counterfeit identification cards. The IDs featured different names and different details, but they all bore the exact same photograph. It was the face of Ross Ulbricht. The package was addressed to an apartment on 15th Street in San Francisco. Homeland Security investigations agents went directly to the address. They knocked on the door. Ross Ulbricht answered. The agents confronted him about the fake IDs. He refused to answer questions, stating that anyone could buy counterfeit documents on the internet. The agents left the apartment without arresting him. Ulbricht likely believed he had dodged a minor problem. He had no idea what he had just given them. More importantly, the package connected Ross Ulbricht, his photograph, and his San Francisco address to another investigative thread already moving around Silk Road. The net was shrinking rapidly. Investigators began combining records from the Silk Road infrastructure with this new physical intelligence. When the FBI analyzed the logs from the Iceland server, they noted the specific IP addresses of the VPNs that Dread Pirate Roberts used to manage the site. They traced those addresses. They led to local internet cafes in San Francisco. One of those cafes was just a short walk down the street from the apartment where Homeland Security had just confronted Ross Ulbricht. Piece by piece, Ross Ulbricht's real-world movements began overlapping flawlessly with the activity they associated with Dread Pirate Roberts. When Ulbricht was connected at the local cafe, the Kingpin was online. When the Kingpin logged off, Ulbricht's physical movements shifted. The pieces were locking together. Federal agents began intense physical surveillance. The dramatic contrast was staggering. Online, Dread Pirate Roberts was the untouchable ideological leader of a global underground economy, commanding millions of dollars, managing complex digital infrastructure, and communicating with thousands of loyal users. In the physical world, Ross Ulbricht was just a guy in a t-shirt, walking through San Francisco, working on his laptop in ordinary coffee shops, completely unaware that multiple federal agencies were watching his every move. But circumstantial evidence, even strong circumstantial evidence, is a dangerous thing to take to court. A defense lawyer could easily argue that someone else was using Ulbricht's internet connection. They could argue his computer had been hijacked by the real mastermind, or that he was simply a user of the site, not its creator. Investigators needed something far stronger. They needed to catch Ross Ulbricht with his fingers on the keyboard, actively logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts, inside the administrative panel of the Silk Road. They needed the laptop. That requirement created the ultimate tactical problem. If they arrested him in his apartment, the computer would likely be locked or powered down. If they grabbed him on the street, the computer would be closed in his backpack. If they surprised him while he was working, his first reaction would be to close the lid. Once that lid closed, the hard drive would immediately encrypt. Without the password, which Ulbricht would never provide, the definitive proof connecting the physical man to the digital empire would be lost entirely. They had to take him in a public place while he was actively working, and they had to separate him from the machine before he could touch it. This brings us back to October 1st, 2013, inside the Glen Park Library. Ulbricht was sitting at a table in the science fiction section. His laptop was open. He was typing. And at that exact moment, he was not just browsing the internet. The operation required perfect coordination. Outside the library, a Homeland Security investigations agent was sitting in a vehicle with his own computer. This agent had previously taken over a Silk Road moderator account under the username Cirrus. The undercover agent messaged Dread Pirate Roberts, engaging him in a conversation about the site's operations. The agent asked him to check a specific flagged message, forcing Dread Pirate Roberts to log into the heavily restricted master control panel of the Silk Road. Inside the library, Ulbricht read the message from Cirrus. He navigated to the master control panel. The undercover agent signaled the arrest team. The target was logged in. Plainclothes agents were scattered around the room. The timing had to be flawless. If Ulbricht noticed them approaching and simply closed the lid, years of investigative work would vanish in an instant. They needed him to look away from the screen just for a second, without his hands touching the machine. Suddenly, a male and female agent standing directly behind Ulbricht staged a loud, vicious lover's quarrel. The man shouted at the top of his lungs. The woman yelled back. The violent noise echoed through the silent library. It was an impossible distraction to ignore. Human instinct took over. Ulbricht turned his head, looking over his shoulder to see what the commotion was about. The exact fraction of a second his eyes left the screen, another agent swooped in from his side. He slid his hands under the open laptop and snatched it straight off the table, pulling it completely out of Ulbricht's reach. Ulbricht turned back, stunned, as agents immediately pinned him against the bookshelves. The laptop was handed to a technical specialist, who immediately executed commands to capture the volatile data in the computer's memory and prevent the machine from going to sleep or locking. The agents looked down at the glowing monitor. The screen was the ultimate prize. Ross Ulbricht was logged directly into the master control panel of the Silk Road. The chat window with the undercover agent Cirrus was sitting wide open. The computer was a digital Pandora's box. It contained everything investigators had spent years looking for. They recovered massive financial ledgers detailing the exact commissions the site had earned. They found the private cryptographic keys used to sign messages exclusively as Dread Pirate Roberts. They found millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. But the most devastating piece of evidence was a meticulously kept personal journal. Ulbricht had documented the entire history of creating and running the Silk Road, from growing the first mushrooms in a cabin to his private thoughts on managing a multi-million-dollar dark web empire. The evidence tying the young man in the library to the digital kingpin was absolute. Immediately following the arrest, federal authorities moved on the remaining infrastructure. Users attempting to access the marketplace found a stark, imposing seizure notice from the FBI and the Department of Justice. The empire had fallen. Authorities confiscated massive amounts of Bitcoin, dismantling the financial core of the operation and permanently shutting down the original Silk Road. In 2015, the mountain of digital evidence recovered from that open laptop resulted in Ulbricht's conviction. To send a definitive message to the dark web, a federal judge handed down a crushing sentence. Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to 2 life terms in federal prison, plus 40 years, with absolutely no possibility of parole. For over a decade, that seemed to be the end of the story. Ulbricht sat in a maximum security cell while the internet moved on. But a relentless public campaign by his family and supporters eventually reached the highest levels of American politics. They argued that a double life sentence was a draconian overreach for a website creator. On January 21, 2025, President Donald Trump granted Ross Ulbricht a full and unconditional pardon. After serving more than 11 years in a federal cell, the man who built the world's most notorious digital black market walked free. The Silk Road had been built to separate a person's physical identity from everything they did online. Ross Ulbricht hid behind Tor, Bitcoin, pseudonyms, encryption, and a name that was supposed to reveal nothing. But investigators never needed to destroy the entire fortress. They only needed to follow the traces left behind before the walls were finished. Before Dread Pirate Roberts became one of the most hunted men on the internet, Ross Ulbricht had made one simple mistake. He told the internet where to find his new website. If you found this story fascinating, leave a like, join the channel, and return for more gripping true stories.